I almost skipped the engagement party because events like that always made me uncomfortable. Not because I disliked family gatherings, but because I had learned over the years that attention, especially the wrong kind, had a way of finding me when I least wanted it. Yet I went anyway, arriving early to my younger cousin Lena's engagement celebration held in a softly lit downtown venue filled with polished white tables, low jazz music drifting through the air, and the quiet confidence of people who expected to be impressed by one another. And I blended in as best I could, wearing a plain charcoal blazer that had been hanging in my closet for years. Clean shoes, no decorations, no medals, just a small, nearly invisible service pin on my left lapel that most people wouldn't notice unless they knew exactly what it meant, which almost no one ever did. And I chose a chair near the edge of the room where I could observe without participating, a habit I'd picked up during my 18 years in the Navy, working in logistics and mission planning, a role that didn't involve kicking down doors or appearing in recruitment videos, but instead revolved around preventing disasters before they happened, ensuring fuel arrived on time, equipment was where it needed to be, routes were adjusted before storms or hostile zones turned them into death traps. And when I retired, I did so quietly, no ceremony, no speeches, no desire to explain to people who only understood heroism if it came with dramatic stories and visible scars. And Lena, radiant in a cream-colored dress, stood near the center of the room laughing with guests, clearly enjoying the attention, while her fiancé Marcus stood beside her in a tailored navy suit, shoulders squared, chin lifted slightly, the posture of someone accustomed to admiration. And when the music softened, she raised her glass and tapped it lightly, smiling wide as she announced to the room that she wanted everyone to know that Marcus was the real hero in her life, that he had deployed multiple times, earned decorations, put his life on the line, and represented everything brave and honorable. And applause filled the space as she squeezed his arm proudly, and I clapped once out of politeness, nothing more, content to remain invisible. But Marcus's smile faltered just slightly as his eyes drifted across the room, scanning faces until they landed on me, or more precisely, on the small pin on my lapel, and I saw the exact moment recognition flickered behind his eyes as his nodding stopped, his expression shifting from confidence to concentration, and he excused himself gently from Lena's side and walked toward me with a slower, more deliberate step. And up close his voice was quieter than I expected as he asked where I got the pin, and I glanced down briefly before answering that it was issued, and his jaw tightened as he asked if I had served with Naval Fleet Support Operations, and when I said yes, something in him straightened instinctively, like muscle memory kicking in, and he spoke almost under his breath as he said that meant I was part of the logistics overhaul team that was structured, deployment routing after the failures in the early 2010s, the changes that stopped units from losing equipment mid-operation, that prevented supply delays that had cost lives. And I didn't respond because there was nothing to correct, and he stepped back half a pace, eyes locked on me as he said they had studied those systems during training, that officers spoke about the anonymous planners who fixed problems no one else even noticed until they were gone, and the background noise of the party softened as nearby conversations slowed, people sensing something had shifted without knowing why. And Lena approached us with a confused smile, asking what was going on, and Marcus turned to her and said plainly that I was the officer whose work kept his unit supplied, that without those changes, half their missions wouldn't have succeeded. And her laugh came out uncertain as she said he must be joking, but he shook his head, serious now, explaining that heroism wasn't always loud, that some people saved lives by preventing failure before it could begin. And the room grew quiet in that way that happens when people realize they've been witnessing something without context. And Lena looked at me differently then, not dismissive, not impressed, just uncertain. And she asked why I never mentioned any of it, and I told her there had never been a reason to, because the work wasn't mine alone, and recognition had never been part of the job. And Marcus extended his hand with a respect that felt genuine, not performative, and thanked me for doing the work no one sees. And I shook his hand once and said that was the job. And the rest of the evening unfolded with a subtle shift, voices lowering as people passed my table, questions forming but not always asked. And as I prepared to leave, Lena stopped me near the door and admitted quietly that she hadn't known heroism could look like that. And I nodded, telling her that most of the time it does. And I stepped out into the night, feeling the same way I always did after moments like that. Not vindicated, not proud, just reminded that the quiet paths often carry the heaviest weight. And that respect, when it arrives unexpectedly, doesn't need to be held on to, only acknowledged before moving on.